Oh, hey, didn't see you there. So, I like Grey Knights a lot. They're one of my favorite factions in terms of Warhammer 40,000. I've loved them since I first got into this hobby and when I first sat down and was like, alright, so if I'm gonna collect an army for a game, what faction will I collect for that? And for Warhammer 40,000, I eventually settled on Grey Knights. They're awesome. They're super cool, like demon-hunting space marines that have their own special weapons and powers, and they've all got access to magic, and they hunt demons, and they're super cool. It's just, there's one issue. The models. See, now this might be a bit of a touchy subject, but I am not a fan of OG Space Marine models. The old school stuff. I respect it, I understand its place in history and how we arrived at it, but I don't like them. They suffer from something that I call shitty poopy diaper oopsie whoopsie I made a crapo in my diaper syndrome. Which is to say, their legs are all like weird and oddly shaped and far apart, and it looks like they've just taken a crap in their Space Marine pants, and they just look super weird and out of proportion with the rest of their bodies. And it really put me off of the army for a very long time, even though I loved everything else about them. They look dumb, in my opinion, to say the least. But what if you could have an army that was as cool as the lore for them is, and as you imagined it, but the models weren't as cool? But what if you could make them cool? Well, the secret is in this bag. It's 3D printed parts. It's mostly legs and some torsos, but that's what's in the bag. It's 3D printed parts. That's the secret. Come on, I'll show you. Hey folks, I'm Gino the Painting Acolyte, and today we're going to build a better Grey Knight. So basically, the models look awesome except for the legs, which are short and stout and splayed and simply look awful. So I did some digging and found some 3D printable files for some better variants. But here's the issue. I don't have a 3D printer, but there's a solution. People can print you things in exchange for money. It's crazy. It's like capitalism or whatever. But with Reddit communities and Etsy shops, you can find people who will 3D print, clean, cure, and send model parts to you. Sure, it might be more expensive if you add it all up than, buying a printer, printing the parts yourself, and using them that. But if you're like me, you don't have the space, or the time, or really the desire at this current moment for a 3D printer. So this video is in part to empower you to hunt down the 3D bits and models you want and get them printed. It's a pretty significant difference, if you ask me. Let's get to painting. So this scheme has been a bit refined since I shot this footage, and you'll see later that it varies somewhat. The first step, though, is to do some tests. Luckily, I have a bunch of these dumpy Marines around to see what they'd look like with a cool scheme. I have this disease where I can never paint models in the default scheme, so I did some experiments on some different ones. Ultimately, I arrived at this. Black armor, white shoulders and some white detailing, gold trim, and some differing cloth and weapon to differentiate between units. We primed the model black, and though I made these ones gray, I ultimately settled on an all-over dry brush of silver after the black prime, which will get dulled down, but basically serves as a nice highlight for our armor without making it all metallic. Then some white in the shoulder pads. For the weapons, I do a pretty basic gradient from black to white to test out my blending skills. It doesn't matter if it isn't perfect, because it'll all get covered in layers of translucent paint, more white and black, more translucent, etc, etc. For these test models I used a nice crimson color, but my idea was to use different colors to mark out different units within the army. For these models, I made the cloth and other details a nice burnt red as a base coat. All the parchment details get a coat of ivory, which will then be covered in Agaros Dunes contrast paint to give a nice, weathered parchment look. I trimmed the armor with a rich gold, also making the engraved lettering that is common on the Marines gold, and picking out a few other details here and there to make gold too. I like to do this within my units and vary it up. This guy's got a gold helmet, this guy has gold shin guards, this guy has a red shoulder pad, etc. It adds some variety while still keeping the scheme consistent. After an all-over black oil wash and some cleanup, we do some basic highlighting and detailing. I'll talk about my basing process in another video, but for now, here's what the models look like, plus with some more of what I've worked on. Personally, I'm pretty in love with them, and you can see with the other models how this scheme is flexible and allows for some uniqueness between units while still looking cohesive as a whole. So that's it for this little tutorial. I hope it made you feel a little bit more empowered. I want you to know that just because you don't have a 3D printer doesn't mean that those cool models and those cool bits that you see online on Reddit, that you see all over the place, doesn't mean that they're out of your reach. Broaden your horizons, take that plunge, and finally scratch that itch that you've had on your dream project for so long. It'll be worth it, I promise. I'm Gina the Painting Acolyte, and that's it for now. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.